We've got a great presentation for you. Linda Bloom is going to present the Exiles for us. But first, just some business and some news. I need a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting that are on the door. We've got Sarah's motion. Second. Everybody in favor? Okay, great. We'll do the treasurer's report quickly. Okay, great. A little lower than usual, but hopefully we'll get some more. I have two things to mention. Our two big events are coming up during the next 2 months. The first is the book stroll, which is on February 18th. And we are doing a book stroll similar to what we did last year on Winding Oaks driveways. And I'm going to let Joan Bolger come up and just tell you a bit about it. And look, she is looking for volunteers to help both for setup and the actual day of the event. Joan.
As Robin said, our book sale will once again be a book stroll, and it will be the same as last year. And I just really want to thank Sandy Fleming, Kathy Bruchak, and Vicki Dodson for offering their garages once again. And my thank you also goes out to their husbands, Peter Fleming, Paul Bruchak, and Mike Dodson. Thank you. And I think people like the idea of strolling, so great. So once again, it takes a village to make this successful. So I know all of you kind of know the way this works, but you know, we rely on you to provide the books. So if you're saving books, the drop-off days will be 1 week before the sale to the administrative office right across from us. So that'll be Thursday the 10th to Thursday the 17th at noon. Because then these Stonebridge people, boy, and I mean, they're really helpful. We'll be bringing all the books over to us. And then you can contact Suzanne Flynn and myself. Information will be on the website. We need people to work on the setup Thursday from 1 o'clock on, and then from 8:30 to 4 o'clock on the sale day. And there are 4 different shifts. So thank you very much and look forward to it.
Thanks, Joan. And now for our authors luncheon, which is going to be on March 11th. We've had a lot of discussion about our authors luncheon among the board with the club management. And so what we're doing now is we are taking signups from actual members to fill it to capacity. So everybody can sign up. And then 2 or 3 weeks out, depending on the status of COVID and what the club is allowing, we may have to pull it back, which means you'll be taken on a first come, first served basis for the actual numbers who can be in the room at the time. But Tim is hopefully optimistic that this current wave will sort of be by us and that, you know, we can hopefully get back to our normal authors luncheon. Our author this year is Kristen Harmel, and she's known for her historical fiction, especially set in during World War II. And her current book is The Forest of Vanishing Stars, which is a book set in the woods outside of Poland during World War II. And her book prior to that was The Book of Lost Names, a beautiful book about people who forged documents for the resistance in France. So, and as for her presence, I'm not sure yet if she'll be here in person or if it will be like last year and we will have her virtually. But we're hoping to have her here. And Emmy White and Diane LaPierre are in charge of the luncheon. And ladies, do you have anything you'd like to say? No? Oh, and one thing I will tell you is we are going to repeat the no raffle because of the conditions with COVID and our merchants and the fact that some people might not be able to get in. So come on over.
Good morning. We are passing around a clipboard and we'd love people to sign up to help us put the decorations together. Again, we're not sure how many tables we're going to have, but we will have some. And we do not have a date yet to put them together, but we have our ideas of how we want to compose this. So we'd really appreciate it if some of you would sign up, and we will pick a couple of dates and put the decorations together. And most importantly, though, we do need volunteers the night before, because usually they had in the past a buffet night on Thursday nights, and we couldn't put any of the book club luncheon tables together till they broke down that from Thursday evening. So we'd work late into Thursday night putting the tables together so that on Friday morning everything was finished. So when you do sign up, you're not signing up for both. You can come to either or both, whatever you'd like, but we would appreciate it. So does anyone have any questions? Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, I'm now going to bring our Vice President, Sarah Drogan, up to introduce our, I'm sorry, Aileen, I skipped over you. Come on up. I had you down. I skipped over.
I'm sure you did. Okay, I'm that old LVCC lady again. To ensure the safety and well-being of our members, the hard decision had been made to cancel any outside activities for the month of January. So those people who were going to do their video reading in January, we have not done that, have we? Okay, so Samantha at LVCC will be contacting you to regroup. Now in February, you know that we're doing it every other Monday. And in February 7th was the date for the show, fashion show.
Oh, yeah.
Fashion show. So we couldn't use that room, which is the Live Oak room. So that was out. The only other date that we had available for that room was the 27th, I think it is, or the 21st, the end of the month. So I bet we're going to move right into March. So be patient and we will do it. I have 9 books left. So if you want to sign up, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, here's Sarah Drogan to introduce our presenter, Linda Bloom.
Good morning to those of you here and those of you watching us remotely. I'm so pleased to introduce my friend, Linda Sebelia Bloom. Linda and I have known each other for over 35 years. I was delighted when she and her husband, Jay, purchased a home in Stonebridge approximately 2 years ago and almost as delighted when she agreed to give a presentation for us. So let me tell you about Linda. Linda taught at the University of Rhode Island as a professor for 45 years, teaching undergraduate and graduate students in the professor of nutrition, and teaching undergraduates and graduates in the dietetic internship program. In addition, she provided statewide leadership for the USDA Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, commonly known as SNAP, as well as the Extended Food and Nutrition Education Program. Her research has brought in more than $20 million to the university, and she was recently inducted into the university's Hall of Fame. Linda is quite desperate to retire, but she currently supervises the state of Rhode Island's Department of Corrections nutrition efforts. Thus, I think we can see that the decision of the Exiles was informed by this experience. She's striving to play golf, a game that she finds much more challenging than any course she has ever taught at the University of Rhode Island. Linda and Jay have 2 daughters and 3 granddaughters. So please welcome Linda, and would you make sure your phones are on silent? Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'm not good at standing still, so I'm going to try real hard not to move around too much. So I'm delighted to be here for a couple reasons. I want to get to know a lot more people because we've only been here for 2 years. But I found The Exiles to be just a fascinating book. Now, I heard a few of you say, oh, look at the screensaver here. So it's really not a screensaver. What these evergreen plants with large pendulous flowers have, the trumpet-shaped corolla, it can be white, cream, orange, red, pink, or yellow, as seen here. Has anyone seen these around here? You have. So all parts of this flower are poisonous. They contain the alkaloids atropine, scopolamine, and hydrocyanine. Ingestion can cause hallucinations, paralysis, abnormally fast heartbeat, and memory loss, and they can be fatal. This lovely flower is banned in Maitland, Florida, which is a suburb of Orlando, because a couple years ago, the police found a bunch of young people in the middle of the streets on the yellow line with their pants down, jumping around. They had been ingesting the flower. They were very high and they were hallucinating. So you can't grow this flower in Maitland, Florida. This flower is also the main ingredient in Hazel's, one of the main characters in the book. Hazel was the herbalist. It was the main ingredient in her mint tea, which she served to Buck, who was an unexpected but not unknown guest. He was the former sailor and murderer of her dear friend Evangeline. Here's a passage describing Hazel's preparation. Hazel took a small earthenware bowl from the counter and went outside and down the steps. Bending over the herb patch, she collected several sprigs of mint with quaking fingers. Then she stood and turned back towards the house, towards the green bush with floppy leaves and pale pink trumpet-shaped flowers that sat by the front door. Maeve lipped a cup from the teapot and handed it to Buck. Sugar or honey? Our mint is strong, Mr. Buck. Better with lots of sugar. There's nothing nicer than sweet tea. Such a peaceful murder scene as Hazel channels her innermost strength to do what needs to be done. So the Exiles, oh, this is going to work, isn't it? Can you make the screen big?
Yes, I was just checking to make sure.
Great. The Exiles by Christina Baker Kline is historically accurate. It's a story of oppression, of endurance, and hope. featuring 3 women struggling to find the resolve needed to survive their new lives. While I wouldn't describe this book as a happy one, it's certainly inspiring and thought-provoking. Mathena, an original chieftain's daughter, is kidnapped by the wife of the island's governor and used as an experiment. Could the governor's wife mold this young girl / savage into a refined British lady? Evangeline, the daughter of a vicar, finds herself in a lot of trouble. She's a well-educated young woman, a governess in London. She's seduced by her employer's son, finds herself pregnant, wrongly accused of murder and theft, and sentenced to 14 years in the land beyond the seas. Hazel, the third main character in the book, a street-smart, uneducated thief, is the one seen as the true criminal here. However, she's skilled at herbal medicine and midwifery, and eventually earns respect and trust on the convict ship, the Medea. So Evangeline and Hazel's lives on the Medea, heading to Van Diemen's Island. As you can see, Van Diemen's Island is on the corner left. It's now known as Tasmania. So their lives intertwine while Mathena experiences her own kind of bondage. Christina Baker Kline presents us with 3 different points of view from 3 different women. And their stories are woven together to create a pretty big picture of friendship, survival, and hope. So here's a little bit about Christina Baker Kline herself. She's a historical novelist who's the author of 8 novels, including the New York Times bestseller, The Orphan Train and A Piece of the World, both of which I bet a lot of you have read. Both have been optioned for films, which is sort of exciting. Christina's 57. She was born in England and raised in the Americas South in Maine. I was trying to find out where she was raised in the Americas South, and nowhere could I find anything except the Americas South. So I'm not sure what that means. She's a graduate of Yale, Cambridge, University of Virginia. She's taught fiction and nonfiction writing, poetry, English literature, literary history, and women's studies at Yale, NYU, and the University of Virginia. And she served as a writer in residence at Fordham University. But for our purposes, she also taught memoir writing to women in the New Jersey Correctional Institute. So that gave her a real basis for some of her writings here. Her novels have received the New England Prize for Fiction, the Maine Literary Award, a Barnes & Noble Discover Award. Her essays and articles have appeared in many publications, including the New York Times, the New York Times Book Review, San Francisco Chronicle. I could go on and on. The Exiles is currently being adapted for television, with Kline as the executive producer. It's being produced in Australia with Australian actresses, so it should be interesting. She currently lives in New York City in Southwest Harbor, Maine, with her husband and her 3 sons. So there's an old joke about Australia. Is anyone here from Australia? No, okay. The joke is that it was founded by a bunch of criminals. Actually, that's not totally false. From 1788 until 1868, Britain sent their convicts to Australia. But interesting enough, the same thing happened in America. The British sent their convicts, over 52,000 of them, they were shipped off to colonial America. And not all convicts were male, some of them were females. The females were accused of such things as lewd behavior, get on the boat to America, and being on the streets after 10 at night, another reason to get them out of the country. Many of us are unaware of our convict roots, and many politicians are not too keen on discussing the facts. However, at the end of the Revolutionary War, we put an end to the practice. As one female inmate from the Newgate prison, the notorious Newgate prison from the book, put it, England used to send its dregs to America, but after the rebellion, they had to find a new rubbish dump. Australia it was. So in 1788, the British government began to colonize Australia with the establishment of the first penal colony on the continent. It's estimated that they sent 164,000 convicts men first, shipped them to Australia under the British government's new Transportation Act, which the British thought was a more humane answer to the death penalty. The Transportation Act had a very clear economic message. The British wanted to beat the French in colonizing Australia because it was rich in timber and flax. They also wanted the unsightly poor removed from their streets. Which takes us to the Exiles, the Medea, one of the many repurposed slave vessels that was put into transport to transport convicted people from England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland to Van Diemen's Land, as I said, now known as Tasmania. Van Diemen's Land is about the size of Ireland or the state of West Virginia. The voyage, which took between 4 and 6 months, depending on the wind and weather, left from London and other British ports to sail south, as you can see here, southwest to Rio in Brazil, then east around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa, and then finally Tasmania. As a friend of mine said, why didn't they go through the Suez Canal? Good reason, it wasn't built yet. But you could see how it would really cut down the traffic. Many of these poor, unfortunate female convicts had never even been on a rowboat, let alone a large ship. So most experienced extreme seasickness during their voyage. This passage is Evangeline's description of being seasick. Beside her was the surgeon. He pointed towards the horizon. She followed his finger but could barely focus. Please stand away, she said, before heaving the contents of her breakfast over the side. Glancing down the railing, she saw other prisoners leaning over, retching streams of liquid down the sides of the ship and into the choppy water. Motion sickness, he said. You'll get used to it. Huh? Shut your eyes, put your fingers in your ears, and try to move with the ship. Don't fight it. She nodded, shutting her eyes, putting her fingers in her ears. But his advice didn't do much good. I don't know how many of you have been seasick, but putting your fingers in your ears and looking at the horizon works for about 10 seconds, and then you're sick again. The smart person here was the herbalist Hazel, because she snuck on board ginger, which I have found is one of the only things that actually works. One other thing works. I had joined a women's sailing team a while ago, and we sailed around the waters of New Zealand. And one of the women was very seasick, and the captain, a woman, said to me, put her in the bosun's chair. A bosun's chair is what you see when they're working on the masts way up. So we put her in the bosun's chair, and then she said to me, throw her overboard. Now, of course, the bosun's chair was attached to the boat. And I said, what in the world? We threw her overboard. As soon as you hit the water, your seasickness is over. But I tell you what, I have never been seasick again out of the fear of somebody doing that to me. Really. I mean, the look on that woman's face was like, oh my God, I'm going to my death. Anyway, the women were housed on the orlop deck, which is the lowest and the smelliest, where they slept on wooden bunks that measured 18 inches wide. Kline's writing about Newgate Prison, the convict ship, and the convict stations in Van Diemen's Island bring the harsh realities of these women's lives to light. Women lived in conditions designed to grind them down and rob them of their humanity. You know, that's still partially true today, which is sad. This is a picture of Newgate Prison, which was built within the city limits of London. It existed for 700 years before they finally tore it down. So it housed a lot of criminals. And this is a picture of Elizabeth Gurney Fry, the first internationally known prison reformer. So she was an actual figure. She became known as the Angel of Prisons for her work with the female inmates at Newgate Prison, which was often referred to as the prototype of hell. Inside Newgate, Elizabeth set up a schoolroom where children imprisoned with their mothers could learn to read and write. She also taught the female convicts how to sew so they could have a skill once they were freed in Australia. I have a picture. It's a famous British picture. I had never seen it before, but it depicts the inside of the Newgate prison. And this is what Christina Baker Kline wrote about this. She said the prisoners had nothing, let me get this closer, prisoners had nothing to lose, which means they had no shame. Let's look how descriptive this is. They blew their noses into their sleeves, picked lice out of each other's hair, and crushed fleas between their fingers as they kicked slithering rats out of the way without a second thought. Sounds incredibly disgusting. So as I said, Elizabeth met our main characters, Evangeline and Hazel, and she and her volunteers gave each woman a bag that contained scraps of cloth, needles, and thread. This picture is a picture of an actual quilt that was made by convict women. It's called the Raja quilt, and it's named for the ship where the women prisoners made the quilt. It's on display at the National Museum of Australia, and I will read to you what it says. The ladies of the convict ship committee. This quilt, worked by the convicts of the ship Raja during their voyage to Van Diemen's Land, is presented as a testimony of the gratitude with which they remember their exertions for their welfare while in England and during their passage, and also as a proof that they have not neglected the ladies' kind admonitions of being industrious. June 1841. Really, I can't imagine thanking people who gave me a quote as they're sending me away. But obviously, you know, they were very touched by someone giving them attention. It was also Elizabeth Fry who gave each convict a tin ticket. At first thought to be humiliating to have to wear it around your neck, but tin tickets were issued to each convict to protect them. As Elizabeth Fry said, it's to be sure that you're accounted for, that you are not lost to the winds. And it would be that tin ticket number 171 that Ruby, Evangeline's daughter, lay in her father's hand at the story's conclusion. Once the disembarking occurred, the women were marched to the Cascade Female Factory, which is a damp distillery cum prison. During the so-called years of transportation, men outnumbered women 9-1. To help colonize Australia, Britain sent about 25,000 women, many who were convicted for just crimes of poverty, to Van Diemen's Land for the sole purpose of taming the men and breeding. So this is a picture of what the Cascade Female Factory looks like today. It is a UNESCO heritage site, and there are regular tours that take people around and explain the lives of the convict women who were actually there. So lucky for us, I guess, records of the lives of convict women have been well preserved. One newspaper in Van Diemen's Land reported on the first female flash mob in 1850. The convict women were known to sing and dance naked under a full moon, rebelliously removing their miserable, scratchy shifts, which were purposely designed to be uncomfortable. At the Cascades Female Factory, one of the many rules were that women were not allowed to talk to men, which doesn't make any sense if they were sent to be breeders. To find a way to communicate with prospective lovers, the women devised a scheme whereby they smuggled love letters inside chickens that were delivered to corrupt warders. As I said, today the Cascade Female Factory is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and regularly holds exhibitions. The Exiles begins with the story of Mathena, an actual person, but she's also a representative of all the children lost to their families and their tribes at the hands of the British. She's whisked away from her tribe at the whimsy of visiting dignitary Lady Franklin, who fancied training one of the savages. a necklace of shells made by her mother, and a pet possum named Waluka were all Mathena had from the life she once knew. Running a finger along the shells of her necklace, Mathena remembered her mother placing it in her hands. Every person you've ever cared about and every place you've ever loved is one of these shells. You're the thread that holds them together. You carry the people and places you cherish with you. Remember that and you'll never be lonely. It's actually a lovely thought. So Mathena's life consisted of another type of captivity. Captivity different from Evangeline's and Hazel's. Mainly her captivity was of being dragged out of tea parties to be pawed and humiliated. Mathena's story, as I said, is a sad one, but it's a real one. She loses touch with her Aboriginal culture, and by the time she's returned to her people, she's seen as an outsider. Many of the people she knew before being taken from her home had died. There are various accounts of what happened to Mathena, but the most likely version is that she left a pub one night and drowned in a puddle. She would have been in her late teens. Perhaps because of the tragic nature of her tale, Mathena's story has been kept alive in Australia, and as a reminder of the suffering of the Aboriginal people. In 1954, the Australian ballerina Lauren Martin produced a ballet based on her life. And in 2008, her story was taken up by the Bangarra Dance Theatre, an Indigenous Australian contemporary dance company. I have a 2.5-minute excerpt of this dance company based on her lives for you to see. So at the beginning, you will see the native Aboriginals, and then you will see the British coming to take them away. And then you see Mathena being, well, you'll see. Is this on? There we go. Yeah. Well, maybe there it is.
Hello, Vicky. Do you need my assistance?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just trying to should be frame from the TV itself. Shouldn't come through TV. It says that it's on.
Thank you.
But let's just make sure. For some reason, it's not playing the sound from the YouTube video.
Well, then let's just play it from your computer.
Okay. Loud enough. I don't think that'll be loud enough for everyone to hear.
Better than nothing.
Okay.
Can we put the microphone next to it, maybe?
Okay. Okay. Thank you. It's just not playing from the YouTube video. I'm not sure, but I can pull up this YouTube video and play it. Let's see. If this makes a difference.
Katie, why don't we just watch it?
Okay. Sorry, I don't know why the audio is.
That's
not-
okay. But could you start it from the beginning,
Oh,
please?
of course.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just have to turn the camera as well. That way. Yeah, I turned it. Yeah.
The thing is always seen wearing a red dress. And right here, if you remember in the book, when she felt the music and felt that it was part of her culture, and she horrifies all the Brits, it's at this point that they decide that she's a savage, and they send her back. There she goes. It's a very interesting dance troupe, and I didn't realize that she was such a famous character. Anyway, the famed Australian novelist Richard Flanagan wrote the book Wanting, which also features Mathilda as one of its main characters. I think this is important. Kline uses this character as a window into the darker side of Australia's past and the suffering endured by the native people who were displaced from their lives. So, across the ocean, 21-year-old Evangeline, also recently orphaned, as I said before, is fired from her job in London and sent to Newgate prison for attempted murder and larceny, when a family treasure, that ruby ring, is found in her room. And of course, we know it's not the only problematic gift she had, because she's carrying the family's eldest son's child. He's now conveniently traveling in Venice. Meanwhile, in Glasgow, the half-starved 16-year-old urchin, Hazel, is caught stealing a silver spoon. Kline takes her time and creates each of these nightmarish settings in detail, from the harrowing months at sea with the randy and violent sailors to the strange new world that awaits Evangeline and Hazel in the convict colony. But nothing is more horrific and completely unexpected than Evangeline's sudden death. I think this is the first book I've read where 1/3 through they killed off a major character. So here's part of that scene. Evangeline's on the boat. Buck, the sailor, is coming up to her. She smelled him, alcohol and perspiration, felt his breath on her neck. He slammed her against the railing, again with such force that the brass nails jutted into her back, and she felt her legs buckle, her feet slip out from under. And then he was lifting her up to the top of the rail. and the ropey muscles of his arms taut around her neck. No, no, what are you? Stop, a woman shrieked. It was Hazel. Stop. For a moment, Evangeline hovered on the hard wood of the railing. Then Buck let go, and the world tilted. She screamed as she fell backwards through the darkness. Her body lay swaddled, her baby lay swaddled in the surgeon's room, and here she was, falling through the air. Her mind refused to believe it. This couldn't be happening. It made no sense. The water hit her shoulder first, a hard slap and a shock of pain. She moved her legs instinctively. They were tangled in her gown, and she didn't know what she was doing. I don't know how to swim, she thought. I don't know how to stay afloat. Her daughter in the birthing bed alone. I left my baby lying here to go and gather blueberries. She was sinking slowly at first, and then her chin was underwater. Her lips, her nose, her eyes. She strained to see in the grainy darkness, eyes stinging from the salt. Frantically, she moved her arms, struggling in her gown, eyes wide open as she tried to fight her way towards the surface, towards the light. But she was falling, still suspended in space. Her gown rose up, flimsy as a handkerchief. Cecil's white handkerchief, lion serpent crown. All lost, the ruby ring, the handkerchief, the tin ticket on the red cord. In the dim recesses of her mind, she remembered something she once read about the act of drowning. That the terror was in resisting, in refusing to accept. Once you let go, it wasn't so hard. You just sank into the water, cool and obliterating. To me, that's the worst death of all. I've always had this fear of drowning, and when I read this, it was like, oh my God, this is my worst nightmare. So this is why I think Christina Baker Kline killed off one of her protagonists. With Evangeline's death, the story obviously shifts radically to Hazel and Ruby, and importantly, allows the author to expand her story. So now all of a sudden she has an opportunity to really go with Hazel and Ruby and not have to worry so much about Evangeline. Kline is a mastery of description with attention to detail that is riveting and informative. For instance, as Evangeline is being transported to Newgate's prison. Now, I don't know how many of you knew this, but this is something else I didn't know. She says, this part of London was like no place Evangeline had ever seen. The air, dense with coal smoke, reeked of horse manure and rotting vegetables. Women in tattered shawls loitered under oil lamps, men huddled around barrel fires. Children, even at this late hour, darted in and out of the road, picking rubbish, shrieking at each other, comparing finds. Evangeline squinted, trying to make out what they had in their hands. Was it, yes, bones? She heard about these children who earned pennies collecting animal bones that were turned to ash and mixed with clay to make the ceramics displayed in ladies' china cups. I didn't know that bone china was actually made out of bone. I don't know what I thought it was, but Evangeline goes on to say, even a few hours ago, she might have felt pity, but now she only felt numb. Or this descriptive line, the lukewarm midday broth that floated with bony pig knuckles, snouts, bits of hooves and hair, moldy bread laced with maggots. Or this description of the Cascade Female Factory. The bare canvas crawled with fleas. The floor was sticky. I have read this several times, and every time I read this, I think about going to work one day, parking in a garage in the middle of Providence, Rhode Island, and going down the stairs, which were sticky and smelled of urine. And if you've ever been in an enclosed environment like that, you exactly know the smell. The floor was sticky. The room smelled of urine and blood and feces. When the door clanged shut, the women were in total darkness. Sitting on a moldy hammock, listening to the moans and coughs and sobs around her, Hazel thought only of Ruby, alone in the nursery. Was she wet? Was she crying? Was she hungry? Once back on land, the narrative loops back to poor, lonely Mathena. then clicks into high gear when Hazel gets a work release assignment in the household of no other than Lady Franklin, the house where Mathina was living. Hazel befriends Mathina, and as the story follows Hazel into her life of freedom, her inner self strength comes to help her time and time again. Actually, being transported to Van Diemen's Land was the best thing that happened to Hazel. It was really her saving grace, because Australia needed people, they needed new settlers, and it was freer. It was freer, it was a freer society. It didn't have all the class and the restrictions that Glasgow had for Hazel. This developing society had a great deal of space, and they needed virtually all skills. So basically, everybody was welcome. And Hazel's skill as a herbalist really allowed her to gain respect and trust among the community. Yes, she faced hard times, but she would never have been this successful back in her native Glasgow. So if Australians once felt ashamed of their convict past, they slowly came to see it as a thing of pride. So highly did they, here we go, did they value the redemptive aspects of the penal system. The $20 note, which is right here, features Mary Ribley, who was transported as a 13-year-old orphan and horse thief, but she became Australia's first successful businesswoman. Today, Australia is on the cutting edge of restorative justice, and I love to read this. It's the leader of a system known as diversionary conferencing. The idea is to let people affected by crime, usually families of both victim and the offenders, together determine how to repair the damage. They suggest punishment and minimize further harm. If guilt is confessed, the police officer may offer this conferencing option, which both reduces the burden on the courts and, interesting enough, trends in favor of the victim. Here's the good part. Currently, conferencing experiments are underway in Pennsylvania, in Minnesota, and South Dakota. So I am currently the nutrition consultant for the Department of Corrections for the state of Rhode Island. My staff is responsible for all the menus and all the nutrition counseling for both the men and the women in all facilities of the state prison. I've taught the women's classes in the prison for years. This time it was a real eye-opener. First, it was a 3-day training, which included everything from general safety, suicide prevention, to why you can't wear khaki pants or open-toed shoes. Khaki pants I could understand because khaki was the color of the uniforms of the men and women at the prison. Open-toed shoes, I had to ask. The answer is too many men have foot fetishes and you won't be safe. Okay. So in year 1 of our grant, when we walked in, there were a total of 214 different diets. Everybody had their own diet. Now there are 5, which makes me not a very popular person. There's a heart-healthy diet for the general population. There's a vegetarian diet, a kosher diet, a diabetic diet, and a halal diet, which is the Muslim diet. Of course, there are medically approved diets, you know, for some types of cancers, celiac disease, blah, blah, blah. But there are constant complaints from the inmates like this. I'm allergic to onions, so you have to remove every onion from all the food served here. I don't like fish. Why doesn't this taste like street food? I hate whole wheat bread. I want more salt. It goes on and on and on. Sometimes I think that the inmates forget that they're in prison and they're not privy to fine restaurant food and they're complaining. In Rhode Island, the inmates do all the cooking. So getting them to follow a new recipe is quite a challenge, as is getting healthier ingredients through the state purchasing system. I mean, buying whole wheat bread and talking to a state purchasing officer, why buy whole wheat bread when white bread is so much cheaper? You know, they usually don't think of health and in convict. You know, it's easy for me to understand that a healthy diet is going to save the state money, but sometimes it's harder for state officials to understand that. People always ask me if I feel safe in this environment. The answer is absolutely yes. Sometimes I feel safer in the prison than I do on the campus of the University of Rhode Island. We're escorted by armed guards every place that we go. So, you know, there's nothing to worry about. But we spend most of our time either in the kitchen or in the medical facility. Interesting though, I am more uncomfortable among the women than the men. There is nothing more frightening than a group of angry women. So I'll just share one story with you about a woman I've been working with for the past 3 years. She's morbidly obese, she's over 300 pounds, and she's at risk for every disease in the book. She's been successfully losing weight for the last 2 years, and she's undergone all the protocols for gastric bypass surgery. She's gone through intensive behavior modification, intensive nutrition education. Just last month, she was approved for surgery, but at the last minute, she declined to accept it. Her reasons? Something we didn't think about. She was ashamed to leave the prison in handcuffs and leg chains. She didn't want to be chained to a hospital bed. She didn't want anyone to see her naked. And on top of all that, she liked her cell and was afraid of losing it. Obviously, she wasn't a good candidate for gastric bypass surgery. She was more interested in the status quo, in the life she made in the prison, than that changing. But I think we're partially to blame because our counseling should have picked up some of that. But you know, she would have been the first patient in the country to receive gastric bypass, the first prisoner. A lot of people think, why would the state spend money on this? A lot of people think, you know, it's her right to get as healthy as possible. But you know, in the end, she decided, forget it, I'm not going to do it. Universities across the nation are consulting with Department of Corrections on a variety of issues: drug counseling, hearing loss, social work, community placement, pharmaceutical needs, and nutrition services. You go into a prison and you just wouldn't believe the university support. In Rhode Island, there are many people from the University of Rhode Island and Brown University, you know, coming together to offer expertise in the health arena. Unfortunately, the United States is the leader in incarceration, with almost 2 million people currently in the nation's prisons and jails. So this shows that, you know, worldwide, we're incarcerating more people than absolutely everybody else. There's been a 500% increase in the last 40 years. Changes in sentencing law and policy, not changes in crime rates, explain most of the increase. So if you look at this slide, most of the increase is due to drug-related activities. So this is how it's changed in like the last 20 years. In the late 1980s, people were arrested for a drug conviction. They spent about 22 months in prison. Now they spend about 5 years. So we're really imprisoning people without giving them very good drug rehab. So these trends have resulted in prison overcrowding and fiscal burdens on the states, despite increasing evidence that large-scale incarcerations are not an effective means of public safety. As for women specifically, the rate of incarceration varies from state to state, but at the national level, 61 out of every 100,000 women are in prison. For the last 20 years, I think this is interesting, the rate of imprisonment has declined by 60% for Black women and increased 40% for white women. The state that has the highest rate of female incarceration is Idaho. Massachusetts has the lowest, and Florida ranks 22nd in the number of women behind bars. Women are more likely to enter prison with a history, this is really sad, of abuse, sexual violence, trauma, and mental health conditions. 86% of females in jail have experienced sexual violence, and a high percentage of them have been in foster care. Seems like our jails and prisons are doing very little to address their needs. Women are more likely to be incarcerated for a drug or a property offense. Property offenses are burglary, larceny, theft, motor vehicle theft, arson, shoplifting, and vandalism. Women have a harder time re-entering society due to post-conviction barriers. The stigma facing female parolees has been greater than those facing men because there are fewer halfway programs and houses for women, fewer shelter beds. Female parolees have a greater difficulty getting employment, and a higher percentage of them become homeless. Recidivism is high and linked to the failure to provide women with the economic health and psychosocial supports they need. Circling back to the Exiles and looking at it from a food and nutrition point of view, there's plenty of food mentioned throughout the novel. Let's see how many of these you can remember. Mrs. Whitstone lures the children away with sponge cake so she can confront Evangeline. This is when they found the ruby ring, and Mrs. Whitstone brings her down to talk to her about it. Evangeline dreams of her old life while in prison. Black tea sweetened with sugar and apricot cake and custard. The convicts and the sailors, daily rations. Listen to this. Porridge called burgoo, stew called lobscouse, a pound of biscuits, a gallon of rum or wine, a cup of oatmeal, half a pound of beef, half a cup of peas, a slab of butter, and 2 ounces of cheese. The women inmates, their rations were morning gruel, which was very thin oatmeal, a water broth of cabbage and turnips. If they were lucky enough, salty beef, dried cod, with one hard tack biscuit and a cup of muddy water. When Olive agrees to be Ruby's wet nurse, Dr. Dunn sneaks some food on the ship. Now on the ship, which I didn't realize, the doctor was in charge of everything. He was the highest ranking officer. So he's also going to have the best food. Dr. Dunn sneaks them food, stewed plums and mincemeat pies and fresh mutton, as well as tea with milk and sugar and toast with blackberry jam. The officers obviously ate much better than anyone else. Before the kitchen fire that takes Waluka, the cook is making turnip pudding with cracklings. At the Franklins, Hazel enjoys a real breakfast after her chores of slow-cooked oats with tea and toast and honey. After running into Mathena at the market, Hazel and Ruby sit with her when Mathena gives Ruby her necklace. They then return to the market for cherries. Maeve and Hazel serve buck, mint tea, and caramel cake. The last one, Ruby explores London and samples strawberry-ade, which is like lemonade, and fried fish and chips. No wonder the life expectancy during these times was only 30 years. They ate little or no green vegetables, minimum amounts of fruit, rich in vitamin C, few iron-rich foods except for mutton. To no one's surprise, though, they got plenty of sweets. My guess is most of them were malnourished to one degree or another. And in keeping with the spirit of the Exiles, I've included a recipe for curd cake. It's like the one that Maeve and Hazel served Buck. It's your choice if you want to serve mint tea or not. So if I have enough time, I would just like to show, do I? No, I don't have enough time. So I'm going to read to you my summary. In summary, The Exiles is an extraordinary tale of how these women survived the hardships of captivity while addressing many social issues still plaguing us today. Prison reform, sexism, racism, and classism. All while giving us hope, The Exiles, all while giving us hope that when you dig deep inside yourself, you can survive anything. Thank you.
Linda was a history major in college, and I think you could see that aspect of her. I thought this was a wonderful fusion of her interests. History, she's an avid reader. She's clearly interested in nutrition and in our penal system. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Does anyone have any comments or questions? Okay, so we'll turn it over to Robin.
Thank you, Linda. That was really wonderful. It was a very moving book, and I think there's a lot of us with Irish, Scottish heritage that know that our ancestors might have been in those situations. I just want to remind you to remember to sign up for the author's luncheon, as it is going to be on a first come, first served basis. Carol has sent out the link, and Mary here at the office. And we will see you on February 11th. And Barbara Chandler is going to present The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. So I think that will be wonderful. And we'll have more updates on the author's luncheon as time moves on. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.